Everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So we've been talking a lot about the other superhero games that were scheduled and slated for this year. And now one of them has actually made its way into 2023, which brings Spider-Man into light. Sony had recently been able to share some official estimates as to how many PlayStation 5 consoles had been sold, and the number is somewhere around 17 million. And then also recently, the forecast sales for March of this year have been cut down by millions of units. There's an IGN article to that effect that Sony was probably expecting to sell a whole bunch of PS5 units, but because of shortages and even because of the shortage of components, as well as all kinds of different logistical issues, those might not be they might not be real numbers, or they might not be even close to the numbers that they were expecting to sell in terms of PS5 console units. Now, how does this affect the Spider-Man game? We have 12 months in terms of potentially seeing a little bit more details about the Spider-Man 2 game in production. That game has probably by now had about 3 to maybe 4 years of production, because after the Spider-Man 2018 game, it was another team that went out to go ahead and work on Miles Morales. I don't know if it was another team that did the Spider-Man remastered, but I'm betting that there might have been at least a 24 to 36 month window where the Spider-Man 2 game has been receiving dedicated production and attention from Insomniac. So when you think about it, you kind of have to ask yourself and say, this other Spider-Man game is supposed to be a console exclusive. It's supposed to be a PlayStation exclusive. But now that there are not so many PlayStation consoles, and if we continue to experience these shortages, can Sony afford to actually keep this particular franchise as an exclusive to PlayStation games? Now, if you kind of also go back and say, okay, but what is the alternative? The alternative is already something that Sony has been exploring and actually enjoying, which is the PC market. You see, PCs have always been in circulation for the longest time. A lot more PCs exist than people are willing to admit in many cases. If you think about it, the 2016 reports for the growth of the PC gaming market showed the billions of dollars. Many people went ahead and got themselves gaming PCs around that time. In fact, I can even say that for myself, I was fortunate to be able to build 2 gaming PCs for very cheap at that time. PC components were being priced at a very fair value for a lot of people. People were upgrading, and I was able to take advantage of that and buy a lot of components for very cheap and build really solid PCs for a very minimal fraction of the cost. Now, what we're seeing is the graphics cards, the GPUs, are the particular components that are facing shortages. But this doesn't mean that the other GPUs and other components somehow fell out of circulation. No, they all have been still in circulation and still in the units of other people's, rigs or setups or whatever it is you want to call it. So any of these PCs that were built, maybe even around the 2014, 2015, and 16, are viable machines, and there are millions and millions of them. And then add the ones that were built after that time, and even this year and the past year, where we've all had, some of these shortages, I can say that there's a viable market there, because that market is not only just available, it's a market that's actually looking forward to getting a lot of these games come on PC. If you look at God of War, you look at Horizon Zero Dawn, and you even look at Days Gone, these 3 games have received a wide acceptance from their audiences. Now, in terms of sales, I don't know if they've actually done so well in sales, but you really can't blame a lot of people. The best time to get a game in the hands of people is at release. That's when all the marketing is done. There's a lot of attention, and dedicated faces and eyes are actually put on a lot of these video games. And when Sony goes ahead to release these games afterwards on PC, I don't think it really serves them. I think a day one release is actually the direction they need to go in order for them to maximize a lot of sales. Which brings me to the proposition that the next Spider-Man game probably needs to come on PC. Now, if you think about it, it makes a whole lot of sense, because Sony already has a presence on PC. They've already started bringing some exclusives, and I think the only natural progression is that they put a Spider-Man game on there day one, because now they have more units or more platforms that can play the game, and the game gets to sell. Now, I also understand that many people bought their PlayStation 5s for exclusives, but the market has changed. Unforeseen circumstances has basically halted or at least slowed down the production and sales of the PlayStation 5 consoles. And if these games that Sony is spending money on developing do not do well in sales, it'll be very challenging for us to see sequels down the road. So for the Sony player, or for the player that actually wanted to go ahead and buy their PS5 just for the exclusives, I can also say to you that wouldn't it be nice to get another Spider-Man game down the road than to have this next Spider-Man game suffer from sales shortages and then we not get anything? I'm sure every Spider-Man game would want a Spider-Man game after Spider-Man, the Spider-Man 2 game that's slated to come out next year. But I think it might be heavily contingent on the console availability right now. And so this might be a time that a lot of sacrifice will have to be made in terms of perception from the fans anyways. And then number two, this might also be a time where Sony might need to make an adaptive move, a move from them just adapting to exactly what it is the market is requesting right now, which is a market that's requesting that, whoever wants to succeed will have to be very flexible. The amount of flexibility that's necessary, right now may not be the one that a big corporation might want to actually give, but it's not one that I see as out of the question. If anything, I think what we might see is maybe a late delay, or maybe Miles Morales, or maybe the 2018 Spider-Man showing up on PC first, and then kind of having everybody get that expectation set for the next game in order not to make the dedicated PlayStation community feel like they've been robbed. But again, even though people may feel like they may have been shorted, the circumstances still speak to the logical conclusion that a Spider-Man game needs to at least show up on PC sooner or later. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Talk to me. Do you think this should be a factor that needs to be considered in bringing a Spider-Man game to PC? Or do you think Sony should continue to hold on to the exclusives and serve their community with that premise that they kind of started out with? All right, that's it for me. Like I said, chat with me in the comment section. I appreciate you guys for watching the video. Peace out.